right, this is a video about SpecStory, which helps you when you're doing AI-driven development using a tool called Cursor. But what if you haven't been doing AI-driven development and you're just getting started? Well, this video is for you. I'll help you get set up with a tool called Cursor that'll let you do software development even if you're not a software engineer or coder. And so this will be a raw video. It's gonna we're not gonna fast forward past the bumpy parts. You'll get to see it all here. And we've got a clean Mac install with just a few pieces of software already installed, and this should give you a sense of what it'll take to get started from scratch building software with Cursor and SpecStory. So the first step is getting Cursor installed and set up. So you can just go to cursor.com and download for your operating system, in this case Mac. We'll have another video for Windows in the future. And then once you've got Cursor installed, you can just run it like you would any other tool. I use Command Space to start applications, but you can go to your applications folder. And on first run, you'll see nothing set up, and it's asking for you to configure some settings. All of these defaults are perfectly fine. I like to say yes and continue. If you don't mind sending data back to Cursor to help improve, you can. If you want privacy mode on, that's fine too. And then Cursor is a tool, a paid tool, $20 a month, and it's well worth it. And it's really, I think, the only tool that we absolutely need to pay for. All the rest will be able to set up free alternatives. But for right now, this is what it looks like when you first got Cursor installed and authenticated before you do anything. And our first step is, yes, we're going to open a folder. I mean, that's the way that most integrated development environments, which Cursor is, most IDEs use a folder-based approach for managing projects. And so we would open a folder, but let's first create a folder. I mean, we could open an empty folder, but usually we start from a starting point. And so the starting point that we'll choose is an application framework called Next.js, and we're going to make use of what's known as a user interface component library called ShadCN, S-H-A-D-C-N. And so the easiest starting point is to just go straight to the ShadCN docs and the installation steps for Next.js. Now, you could prompt your way here. So you could ask ChatGPT or Claude to help you get a new project set up. So how do I set up a new project on Mac with ShadCN and Next.js? And it'll walk you through some steps. And at times I've found that some of these steps are actually out of date. And so in this particular case, I prefer to use the raw documentation at ui.shadcn.com/docs, and we'll do the Next.js installation. So step one of running this Next.js installation, I've chosen the NPM version. Again, you can choose any of these, but most of the output of Cursor and Claude I found favors the most used tools, and NPM is one of, if not the most used tool for these particular things. And NPM is one of a pair of tools that we're going to need to do anything. So when we're building UI applications, we have lots of choices, but a really good set of standard choices is to use Node. And so Node is a framework for building websites or interactive web applications, and that's what we're going to do here. So first step would be to run this command, right? So I can hit this little copy button to copy it, and then I can open up something on Mac called Terminal. If you're not familiar with it, it's just a different interface to interact with all the parts of your Mac operating system by typing commands instead of clicking around. And for in this terminal, we can just hit Command V to paste this command that we had just copied and try to run it. But the first thing you'll notice is that npx is not found. So we need to get some tools set up on here first, at least a minimal set of tools for software development. And two of those are Node and npm. And npx is just one of the commands that's available as part of the npm product or software app. So let's get some tools installed on our Mac. The most widely used tool for installing other tools, like other development tools on a Mac, is a tool called Homebrew, which you can search for. And Homebrew tries to make it dead simple to get started. There's just a single command line that you run in order to install Homebrew itself, which then opens the door to install lots of other applications. So we'll install Homebrew by just copying and pasting that terminal command. Now this is an interesting point. I've got to type in my password. This is my Macintosh password. This whole process will only work if you're set up as a Mac administrator on your laptop or on your Mac desktop. If you don't know what that means, you need to Google Mac administrator and make sure you get your account, your Mac account set up properly for that. Okay, great. So lots of text scrolling across the screen, but the most important part is just that this is going to get Homebrew set up, which is going to unlock a lot for us to be able to install all of the underlying tools that we need, namely Node and npm. Okay, great. So it's a little bit hidden, but don't skip this part. It's pretty important. So on these next steps, we need to copy and run each of these commands in succession. So we can select each one. I'm just hitting Command C, Command V, or you could even right-click and say copy, and right-click and say paste, then enter. But we'll run each of these commands in sequence. Okay, and so now we should be set up so that whenever we want to, we can run the brew command, which is what we just installed. So great, there's the brew command working for us. Now, the two things we need brew to install for us are Node and npm. It's just one command. If you ever get lost, you can ask ChatGPT, how do I install Node using Homebrew? Fun, I got a split response in this particular case, but seems pretty helpful. Either one is fine. So we'll go down here. So it actually suggests first running brew update, as you can see. We just installed it, so it should already be up to date. Then we can run brew install node. That'll go off and install Node.js, which is the underlying framework that lots of people have collaborated together to build for us to be able to create modern web sites and web applications. And then we can run node-v to see which version of Node is installed. Great, 23.4 in my case, and the version of npm. Okay, great. So all the defaults should be fine, and we're all set to go now. This is like our minimal development environment tooling is set up. We'll get to one more set of tools around source code management, or being able to save and back up our project to GitHub, but we'll hit those a little bit later. Okay, great. So now that we've got these installed, let's sort of unwind or roll back up to where we started this with, which was that we wanted to create a new application using ShadCN. And so now that we've got Node and npm installed, we should be able to run this command. So let's copy this command, and we'll run it right here in the terminal. Maybe one side path to note is, where are we in this terminal, right? Like, what does this even map to? It looks a little funky. Let's bring up a Finder window, and that'll help us figure out where we are, right? So in Finder, you can choose Go and go to folder. And then if you just type in that tilde, you'll see it a map to a folder called users/your name. In this case, my name on this Mac is demo. So if you just hit enter on that, you'll end up in the demo folder. And you can even grab this and drag it over. Again, in my case, it says demo. In your case, it'll say your Mac username here. And now we can see exactly where we are. So in other words, if we were to list all the files here, so ls is the command for listing all the files here, you'll see the same folders that we see here when we're in this directory. So that's how that works. That's just a little side note about where we're about to run this command, and it matters because as you'll see in a second, when I run this command inside the terminal, it'll actually create a new directory right where I am. So I run this command. In general, all the defaults make sense, and so you can just hit enter to accept them. Would you like to start a new Next.js project? Yes, just hit enter. The name of your project, you can leave it my app, but I'm going to call this one hello. I think that'll do it. And then you just give it a couple of minutes to create this new project for you. Okay, when that first part completes, what you then want to do, again, is you can just select the defaults. You can read about ShadCN and all the options available here, but we'll just accept as is. And now the thing you'll notice, if you run that ls command again, there's a new directory called hello. And inside the Finder, you'll see that same directory or folder created here. This is exactly what we needed in order to get started. We just needed a new project. So now, if we come to Cursor, a couple of tricks. One, if you see this option, do you want to install a command in order to run Cursor? I would recommend it. I choose to install the command named Cursor. Say OK. What this now means is that you should be able to come to your terminal and run Cursor on any directory, like the hello directory, and it'll just open Cursor straight to that directory for you. As you get more used to working in the terminal, you'll see that that's pretty handy. Okay, so here's our open project inside Cursor. We can close this other Cursor window. We can expand this to take up a bunch of room. We can skip past the entire welcome by Xing that out. And there's two really important things that we want to enable when we come into Cursor. One is the terminal. This is the same terminal that we were just in, right here, but now it's right there and integrated into Cursor. And the other thing is the AI pane over on the right-hand side, which lets us do the magic and use AI to help us write code. So at this point, you're in pretty good shape. I can give you the command that you need to run to get this sample application up and running, but you can also use Cursor and ask it. So what command can I run to start this application? See, so it doesn't have any context. It doesn't know what we're asking about, even though it's all right here. When you have when you use Cursor, you can add context, and context means a pointer to any of the files in your current project directory, or lots of other outside content. But one of the simplest ways, especially when you're started and you just have a tiny project to give Cursor context, is to say that we want to include the entire code base. Whoops, we can actually say it here with the @ code base. Is a way to tell Cursor this chat UI and Cursor to look at everything here, all the files and folders when it's trying to answer the question. So if we say that and then ask, what command can I run to start this application, it should be able to give us some help. You can see it's reading all the files in the project in order to help answer the question, right? And you can start the development server using any of these commands. And now I know this creates extra confusion. Turns out the software development community likes package managers and has created 4 different ones that do roughly the same thing. We'll just stick to npm as the command we use for everything when we're doing package management. And so when it says here, it says you can start the development server using any of these commands. When it says that, it means these commands inside of a terminal. So come over to terminal and type out that command. If you hit copy, it'll copy all 4 of them, and we don't want all 4 of them. You could just copy one of them if you want, and then come over here and paste it. But either way, you want to get npm run dev. That command you're probably going to end up memorizing because you run it so often. And what this is doing is it's running what's known as a server, a web server, that allows you to interact with the code of this website in order to see it in your browser, right? So this server will kind of package up all this code and turn it into a website that you'll see. And we can now visit this URL in our browser. I could just copy it and paste it into my browser, or if I want, I can hold down the command key and hit the link, and it'll open my browser right there for me. And this whole site is exactly what this code here says should be rendered. And we won't go into too much detail, but just to sort of prove it out, there's a lot of code in here, but if we get to any of these, you can see get started by editing, save, and see your changes instantly. Get started by editing, save, and see your changes instantly. Like, this is the code that's powering this site. Great. Now we can move on and create a site that we actually want. All right, to create a site that we actually want, because we wanted a hello site, not one that said Next.js and all of this on it. Right, so this is the starting site. Now we can use Cursor to really just do all of the heavy lifting for us. Right, once we get things to this point and set up, the world is our oyster. And so I often like to create new composers when I'm onto a new task. You can always get back to your old composers whenever you want, but I create a new composer. Composer is just like a conversation between you and the AI acting as your engineer. And so I create a new composer, and you could literally ask it to build anything you want. I'm going to start with something simple. Let's make the most fun hello world page we can. It's winter time, and I like the holiday season. Create a page for the holidays and winter. You can get creative and make some SVGs so the page looks pretty. And don't worry if you don't know what an SVG is. It's just a type of image format that Cursor and Claude are particularly good at rendering. So we'll just submit that. Should be enough to get something fun created. And we'll let Cursor and Cursor Composer do its work by suggesting changes and edits to all of our files. And sure, we could dig in and try and follow along, and there's a lot of learning to be done with that, but sometimes we just want to hit accept all and see what we've got. So one of the nice things is, as you make and save changes in the code, or more specifically as Cursor makes changes in the code and you hit apply all to save them, this server that we were running, so remember we started npm run dev, that's still running. It's going in the background and it's looking for any changes to our application files, and it's immediately incorporating them so that when we come back to the browser and we reload, we can see those changes. And so look how fun it is, right? This is amazing. I mean, I couldn't have even imagined this a year ago, but Cursor and Claude are able to write the code for a holiday site just like this. Now, let's take a minute to add in some more traditional elements of web applications. And this will start to get at the reason why we installed ShadCN, right? So if we look at ShadCN, it's pretty interesting because what it is a component library, right? Like if you've been to any website or web application, you've probably seen some combination of these already on the page. I mean, everything from a simple button that looks nice and styled and works well to a calendar control or a card, where a card is just this sort of rounded rectangle layout that gets used often in modern web sites and web apps. So we're going to use cards and buttons in our hello site, and the easiest way to do this is what we've been doing so far, to just ask Cursor to help us do that. And so let's add 2 cards to the site that present some holiday greetings. Now I'm hoping that Cursor will pick up this word cards and know that I mean ShadCN cards. Let's see if it does. Yeah, in this particular case, I don't think it did because I don't see any mention of ShadCN. We can accept all and we can come back to our app. And they do look nice. There's some nice cards there. And so maybe it did pick them up, or maybe that's enough. Yeah, it looks like it just used styling in order to create those cards. I can ask it, did you use ShadCN for those cards? Ah, great, and it explains it to me. Yes, let's do that. This is already a ShadCN project. Okay, we accept that and come over. Oh, we can see something went wrong. This is a great example. Not to worry, Cursor and Claude can help us with this. We just copy the error. Actually, we try to copy as much context as we can, so it doesn't hurt to get the file name in there too. Command-C, come back, and literally just paste that error in, and Cursor will help us. And it realizes that that it's not installed yet, right? So we're going to run this command. Again, when it looks like a command like this, we're going to run it inside the terminal. You have a couple of choices, the easiest of which is to stop what's already running in this terminal. The way to do that is to hold down the control key, not the command key, but the control key, and hit C. So control C, that stops the npm run dev server. And then we can copy this line, paste it into our terminal. And it says, I need to install the following packages to proceed. Okay, yes. In general, in many cases, accepting defaults gets us a long way. The only problem here is, now we can see this didn't work. Another debugging approach is that we can just copy and paste this whole error, straight into the same composer history. So it has all that rich context. See, so now it's sending us in a loop. And this is where just having past experience is helpful. So unfortunately, AI and chat can't get us everywhere. What's actually happening, and again, I know this from experience, is that this command is out of date. And if we go back to our ShadCN install documentation, so you remember this Next.js setup guide, when you want to add a component, you can see it looks almost the same, but it's npx ShadCN at latest, and then add the component name. Here it says ShadCN-UI. I can correct it. I can do this manually, or I can tell AI that it's doing it wrong. You've got the wrong command. Look at this recent documentation. And you can either reference the URL of this documentation, or sometimes I find it more consistent to just copy all the text on the page and paste it in. Okay, so we've already initialized ShadCN, and the card component can be added by copying this and pasting that in. Okay, great. So there's our card component. All the way up here, we had already accepted these changes. We're not going to see anything until we get our development server running again. To quickly get back to recently run commands, you can use the up arrow or the down arrow to scroll through your command history. I hit the up arrow a couple of times and I get to npm run dev. Hit enter. We can see we're back up and running on localhost 3000. I can command click into it, close this old window or that old tab, and here we are, and we've got these two cards, which are ShadCN based cards, which is great. And so maybe one more trick just to get through it all. Let's add a button to each of these cards. So we'll add a button to each of these cards that closes the card, and the button can say cheers. Okay, so while that's doing that, we can scroll up and see, okay, it says to run the command again for adding a new component, right? We've got the card component. Now we want to add the button component. Because we've got the context of this whole conversation, including me correcting it, it gets the right command here instead of the wrong command. So I can copy this. And here's an advanced little trick. If you don't want to stop and restart your development server, one cool thing you can do in the terminal view inside Cursor is you can create a new terminal, right? So I can get back to the one that's running my dev server and just let that keep running. I can go into a new one that's giving me a command line so that I can run the command that I want to run. It's going to install this new button component into ShadCN. When I'm happy with that, I can actually close that or kill and delete that terminal, leave this one running. Not sure why those problems are popping up, but we can deal with those a little bit later. We think we've got the button component installed, and we have to finish applying and accepting all the changes that it proposed to get those buttons into the code. We hit accept all, and then when we come back to our window, you can see there's these cheers buttons, right? I can hit cheers and dismiss each of these cards, right? And if I want to see it again, I can restart. All right, one last piece. Let's say that we want to share this page with somebody else. Well, localhost is a special URL. It's not one that I can just copy and paste and share with somebody. It literally means just point to something running on this machine here. Instead, we've got a few more steps to get to the point where this can be live on the web with a URL that anybody can access. So to get to that point, one of the first things that we need to do is get all of the code that we just had Cursor create for us up into a centralized place. And that centralized place that most software developers and software composers use is a tool or site called GitHub. GitHub is just a place where you can store all your code and share it with others. And I highly recommend you use this approach. You can sign up for a new GitHub account very easily. I've already got one, and so I'll sign into it. And I've just got to verify really quickly that this is me. And so we'll do that, and we're in. Now, you don't have to know any of the details of GitHub. We can actually ask Cursor for help on all of this. So I'm brand new to using GitHub. I just set up an account. Now, walk me through the steps of getting the code in this project shared on GitHub. Great. So I'm going to ask it that question, and it should walk me through step by step. All right, so let's get, okay, so here are the steps, step by step. First, initialize a Git repository, right? So again, we can stop this running server if we want, or create a new terminal. I'll just hit Control-C to stop this. I want to copy this command and run it. My current directory. Okay, it was already initialized, so I guess it reinitialized it. Good. Add your files to Git staging. Let's do that. Okay, perfect. Create your first commit. Yep, we're going to need to do that. And you'll see this message, really interesting. Your name and email address were configured automatically based on your username and host name, which is great. Sometimes this doesn't happen. If you run into any errors here, again, just copy and paste them over, and you should be able to have Cursor help you. So now that we've done those first three steps, we'll just continue on. So connect your local repository to GitHub. GitHub will show these commands after creating the repository, but they'll look like this, replaced with your actual GitHub. So to me, step 5 is confusing. I don't actually understand it in detail. If I hadn't done it before, I'd be a little lost. And so I would just say, I don't understand step 5. Okay, so it says after you create a repository on GitHub. I didn't create a repository on GitHub. Yeah, let's create one. So go to github.com, click the plus icon, create a new repository, give it a name, and sort of accept the defaults as their recommendation. So we'll come here, we'll hit the plus, create new repository like it suggested. Now, in this case, I find it much easier to just name this repository the same as the name of our project directory. So if you remember, that was hello. So we'll just create a repository named hello. It will be public, meaning everybody on the web will be able to see it and find it, which is not a problem for a sample project like that, but just keep that in mind for future projects. That's all it takes, right? And now we can just hit create repository. And there we go. It's set up, and now we need to follow the commands. And we're going to push an existing repository from the command line. This is exactly what we're doing. We have an existing repository. It's here. It's sort of behind the scenes, but it's what we just did when we did git init. And it doesn't have to be behind the scenes. You can actually see it here. This is the Git repository icon. We can switch back and forth between files in the project or the Git repository. So here's our local Git repository, and we'll just follow these instructions right here. So first we do this, then we do this, then we do this. Okay, we're going to allow it to sign in. We have a code, I guess, that we need to copy and paste. So we copy and continue. We're going to continue with this account. We can paste that code it just gave us. Yes, I'm happy to authorize Visual Studio Code, which is sort of another name for Cursor. You're all set. Our device is now connected. We should be able to close that window, come back to Cursor, and it says, I think we're all done. Branch is all set up. And so the way we could check that is by coming back to GitHub, hitting reload on this page, and seeing if it looks like a repository with all of our files. And there they are. It does. So this is great progress. We've now got our files inside of GitHub. And if I didn't know what I was doing, I could clarify and make sure that we've done everything we need to do. So if I say, for example, okay, I created that repo on GitHub and followed these instructions, and you could just paste in, actually we lost those instructions, but I can tell it exactly what we did, right? So we, right here, ran all of these things. So we'll just copy that and follow these instructions or ran these commands. How can I see if it worked? And what are the next steps, if any? And it suggests doing exactly what we did, visiting our repository at github.com, seeing all our files listed there. If you remember, we just did that. And it suggests adding a readme.markdown file to describe your project. You can do this directly on GitHub or locally. Okay, that sounds great. In Cursor, when there are changes, multiple changes that might happen, you have a couple of choices. You can hit accept all, and it'll apply any changes where you see sort of a pending application. Or you could go through individually and accept changes, right? So in this case, I'll accept those changes individually. And if you look over here, there's a new README file that got created. We see that because we're in our version control view and it tracks every change that just happened. Or if we come back to our files view and look at README, we can see that it's added to this file. And this little yellow bar shows all the changes that have happened in terms of adding to this file. In addition, it's created this git ignore for us, which is something that it had created much earlier. It's actually pending a save. You can tell by that white dot that this is an unsaved file, and you can see the one change that it made to it. So we must have hit accept all, and this was one of the, sorry, no, accept all would have accepted and saved the changes. So it's a pending change from before. We can ask more about it if we're ever confused. Right? We can always ask about it. We can say, I see an unsaved file called .gitignore, see .gitignore. And here I could just write the file name and then it'll think about gitignore files. If you wanted to reason about this specific gitignore file, you can use an @ and reference a specific file name. It's going to then look at that file's contents as part of the context for this prompt. But you can say, I see an unsaved file called .gitignore. Should I save it? Oh, I guess it caused confusion. You already have the gitignore file in your project. I can see it in your relevant files list. Okay, but what about the fact that it looks like there are pending changes? So take a screenshot. It looks like it has pending changes. Okay, to handle this change, you should save the contents and commit these changes. Okay, so let's yes, accept, save, and then commit these changes. So we'll follow these instructions here. Okay. And then git push. These same commands that we run on the command line can actually be accomplished through here using the commit and sync buttons up here. And in fact, let's do that with the README. So added to the README. Right, if you remember, these are the changes. This is an interesting view, side by side, what the old uncommitted version, or what the old committed version looks like, and then the changes that we've made. So, yep, let's go ahead and commit that. Yes, we want to stage and commit all of these changes. So specifically README. And I knew at some point this was going to bite us. So it doesn't like the fact that we don't have a username. And you can see there's a bunch of errors here, and it's kind of scary. So let's copy a bunch of these errors. I mean, we could even copy the whole log, I suppose. And it looks like Cursor's going to help us through that, right? So we need to run these commands in the terminal. So we're in the output now. This is an output of the Git log. So we don't want that. We want to be back here in the terminal. And we want to run these two commands, right? So I could just copy this command, but if you look carefully for a second, you'll notice that it's not just a command. It's got space for me to put in your name, right? So I'll put in demo. And then the second command, which is, again, it's got a placeholder for my email address, right? So demo. Okay, and now if we try and run this commit, either using the commands here or using what I just did there, you can see the commit works and the sync changes work. I say OK, and that goes up there. So git add and git commit was like hitting that first button. Git push was like hitting that second button. In general, yes, the answer to git fetch running periodically is yes, and often when in doubt, I do accept the defaults. And so we can see what just happened by clicking on this README file and noticing that this text about it being a festive winter theme page comes up. So great, we're at the point where we've successfully pushed this to GitHub. But that's not enough. Yes, there's a URL here. It's a GitHub URL. We could share this with somebody, but all they would see is our code, not our running website or application. And so there's just one more tool and one more step that we need to go through in order to get a running application, and that's to use a product called Vercel. And Vercel works very nicely with the type of application we just built, which is known as a Next.js web application. So let's get started. We can just sign up if we haven't already. I'm working on personal projects. It's a great way to do it. My name is Demo, and I can continue with GitHub, and it will just go through and authorize Vercel, which is exactly what we want, right? We can skip all this, but one of the really nice things is that Vercel is now connected directly to our GitHub. Actually kind of surprised that that didn't do it. It looks like there's still an install, so let's make sure we do the install for GitHub account, yes, we'll give it access to all repositories. I've worked with Vercel many times in the past, so I trust it to only access what I tell it to. There we go. So our first Vercel GitHub integration was literally just to do the sign in to Vercel. That second one, the install, is what was needed in order for Vercel to connect to our repositories. We can see that hello repository that we just updated 2 minutes ago. I can hit the import button here. Again, often defaults are your friend, especially when you're working with a Next.js application and Vercel. Generally, those work very well together. I can hit the deploy button. And then the really nice thing is that this should take everything that we've done, all that code, and packaged it up. If you want to see more details, you can watch these logs sort of scroll by as it's going through its deployment. But it takes a minute or two, and we just wait for it to complete. And then we can see that we hit some errors. So whoops, we expanded all lines, but let's just look at the errors. And I'd like to copy these, or if I can't copy them, I'll grab a screenshot, copy that screenshot in, come back to Cursor and say, I tried to deploy this on Vercel and got these errors. And then I just paste, Command V, the screenshot that I just took, and let's see what its recommendations are. Let's fix these ESLint errors. Now, we could dig in and learn about ESLint. We could Google it. We could ask ChatGPT, or we could even ask Cursor itself what ESLint is. I happen to know it's just a tool for trying to create clean code. So even though these aren't hard errors, it turns out that by default, Next.js and Vercel are configured to really try and have clean code. It explains all these errors to us, but I think I'll just accept all its proposed changes. And then one other little trick, this problems tab, if I come over to it, I can see other potential problems. It turns out these are red herrings, but we can still ask about it. Yep, I actually think now we're going down a whole path that we don't actually want to be down. So I'm going to back out of this, reject all of those, and let's come back to here. So I'm going to rerun this. Got these errors. Yeah, continue and revert. So let's come back to this problem and fix it. There we go. Okay, great. So let's accept those. Let's not worry about these for now. Okay, we've accepted those changes. Now we're having to read a little bit more. Let's get straight into fixing these errors. Yes, fix these errors. Right, it's better to fix the actual issues. Would you like me to fix the specific lines? Okay, let's accept this full set of fixes. And we can say, come back to our terminal, and we'll say, okay, let's get this deployed on Vercel. What are the next steps? Okay, make sure all your changes are committed and pushed to GitHub. Right, we can run these commands, or as we've learned, we can just use the Git UI over here. I kind of like the message that it created for us, so let's grab that message, copy it, and put that in the message and commit. Yes, stage, commit, push. Great. Okay, and then we go to Vercel's website. So let's see if we can sort it from here. We're in Vercel's website. We can try and hit deploy again. And hopefully this time we get past those errors. Again, if we want to watch, we can expand all the lines and watch. Okay, so we're still dealing with ESLint errors. So, all logs, no, just the errors. At a certain point, we could decide that Vercel won't build. At a certain point, we could decide that we need to dig in, learn more about ESLint, learn more about Vercel, do some research of our own, build up our knowledge base. But for now, let's try one more time to see if we can have Cursor and Claude get us past it. So let's fix this by installing the dependencies and updating the configuration. Okay, let's copy that. That looks like a terminal command that will run right here. Update your file. Okay, so that install finished. Let's accept and update this file. And then commit and push these changes. So again, we can come here and commit and push these changes. I like to use the visual source control tool. But you could run the commands if you prefer. Yes, we'll run all those. Yes, we'll sync the changes. Those changes should have all come through. And now we'll come back here and we'll try to deploy again. There goes the deployment. We can even see this matches up with the most recent commit that we made. Update ESLint configuration is exactly what we typed into that message. We'll watch as it goes, and hopefully we get past those warnings. Okay, we still got a small warning, but not an error. So hopefully that lets us keep going. Looks like it might. Congratulations, we just deployed a new project. It's fun. It gives you a little preview of it too. After we've gotten through our whole deployment, it turns out there are a couple of different URLs, one that we can visit for working and commenting on this particular deployment, one that we can share with the world. So it's this one that we can share with the world that we care the most about. I guess that's what this little global icon means. We click on it. You can see, our application up and running in our view, and we get a Vercel toolbar and some extra accompaniments because we're logged into Vercel. But if we had shared this with somebody else, which we can simulate by opening an incognito window, we share that with somebody else, they're just going to see our application, our page, it's going to work, and they're going to have a happy holiday. All right, now that we've got our happy holiday site all built, let's learn a little bit about what SpecStory can do to help with this flow. So we can come to specstory.com, and right here we'll click on Get Cursor Extension, and it'll give us all the details of how to get SpecStory installed into Cursor. And the first thing we need to do is just download the extension, and then we can open up Cursor. And the command we want to run is on the palette, so we could either choose to view the command palette or hit Shift Command P. And when we get that up, we want to type VSIX. That's the extension for extensions files. And so we're going to look for a VSIX file, the one that we just downloaded, SpecStory VS Code latest.v6, and hit install. And we can see now completed installing the extension. And if we go to our extensions, we can click. And that's it. It's installed. There's some help text and documentation all throughout here, but I'm going to walk you through using it. And so now that we've got SpecStory installed, there's two big things that we can do with it. Those are save this entire chat history, not just this one, but all Composer sessions and chats that we've had. Or we can share these out. So SpecStory makes it really easy to share these with others. So let's start by saving. Both of the commands are run from the command palette inside Cursor. You can get to the command palette a couple of different ways. So you can search help for it, and you can see view command palette. You can also see Shift Command P is the keystroke that'll get you to that command palette. So Shift Command P, and there's our palette. And if we just type SpecStory, we can see our two commands. The first one is to save the composer history. And so saving the composer history creates a new file. And it's a markdown file, which is then opened for preview right here for you. You can close that preview if you don't like it and you just want to look through the markdown file. But you'll see that this is all of the history I've had for building out this entire application. So all of the chats that I've had over here, all the composer sessions I've had over here are saved in this file for me. And actually, they're staged. If I want to really save this, I can hit Command S, save this file, and maybe we'll call it SpecStory history.markdown. And now there's our SpecStory history markdown file. Can always get back to it whenever we need to. Interestingly enough, we can even reference, that's okay. We can even reference this file if we want, SpecStory history. Give me a brief summary of everything I did in this project. We'll see if it's able to handle that. Look at that. So helps us remember everything we had to do to get through this development. Or if we want to completely unlock this history for others, we can go back to that command palette, again, Command Shift P, and we can say SpecStory share composer and chat history. We see down on the left here that it's published out this history for me to share with others. I can open it. And now I get a nice clean view of everything that happened from start to finish in the AI chat history. It's a great way to share the story of how you created your application.